Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Parenting Hour. You're tuned into Unity FM 93.5 here in Birmingham and 105.1 down south in Luton and Peterborough and all the cities that take on this show as well. We're so happy to be with you this evening. Another Parenting Hour show, alhamdulillah. And we have a very exciting lineup of guests this evening. A lot of people in front of me here. I can see them all, but you can't see them, listeners. And they're all smiling, which is lovely, mashallah, waiting to come on the show and introduce what they do and explain the services that they provide. And we're bringing this specially because we know during COVID-19 period that there is a lot of mental health, emotional health, well-being issues that people are having, and we're all suffering that. Anxiety, staying at home, this is something we've never had before. This is something new. We're missing our families, missing our friends. It's hard to have those social relationships with people, and it's affecting us all, and some more than others. And especially if you are in the perinatal period, which we would say if you're pregnant or have had a baby in the last 2 years, again, it can be very isolating if you are at home and not mixing with others, not mixing with your mom or your mom-in-law or your sister-in-laws to get that advice and don't know where to turn to. So this evening, we have put on this special show with two wonderful organizations, one working nationally, one working in Birmingham. I think maybe they're outside Birmingham as well. When we come to Acacia, they'll explain that to us. And offering their services there, have been well established, working for many years and working with ethnic minorities as well. And really willing to help you and support you, listeners. So this is your opportunity to listen, to take down notes for yourself or for others. It may be that you are not pregnant or have had a baby, but you may know of a neighbor, of a friend, of a relative that this information is very useful for. So please do listen into this and be observant of what we're trying to say as best as you can. I know we're in half term and we're winding down and the children are at home and you're maybe not able to take everything on board, but if you do have any questions for us, you can email studio@unityfm.net and we will get those questions answered to you and to you on another show. And I'm sure we can bring back our guests again on another show, or if it is more urgently, we will put you in contact with each organization and they can answer you individually themselves as well. And I'm sure our guests are willing to do that and wanting to support you. So while they give out their own numbers during the show as well and their own websites, if you forget, you can always contact the studio and we can pass on that to you as well. So let me introduce my two organizations. I've got APP, which is the Association of Postpartum Psychosis, and I've got Acacia. And both of them are really wonderful organizations. And we've got two people from each organization here this evening, all eager to tell you about what they do and how you can, listeners, get this message across to others if it's not for yourself. So let us go to APP first. Hi, Hannah, how are you?
Hi, Kathleen. I'm good, thank you. Thanks very much for having us on this show, this really important show that you're putting on this evening. Thanks so much. My name's Hannah Bissett. I'm one of the national coordinators at APP and I oversee a number of projects throughout the country. We do work throughout the country, especially online, which we've always done as an organisation and obviously much more so now in the COVID-19 situation we're in. We offer information and peer support for women and families who've been affected by postpartum psychosis. That is a very serious illness that can happen after you have a baby. I was unwell after I had my eldest son 10.5 years ago now. I also have a 6-year-old. But I suppose the good news with this illness, with any mental illness, especially in perinatal period, is that there's a lot of help and support and information out there and actually very good treatments that will get you back to yourself. It's not anything that everybody would ever imagine could happen to them, but it can. And I think that awareness is really important and we work a lot on that at APP. So great to join you this evening from sunny North Yorkshire.
Oh, lovely, 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 wonderful. That's a lovely introduction to APP and North Yorkshire. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
you have with you your colleague here, that's also Natalie with us this evening. Hi, Natalie. You also work for APP.
Yes, hi Kathleen. Thank you again for having us on the show tonight. Yeah, so I'm a peer support worker for Action on Postpartum Psychosis, working in conjunction with that organisation and the NHS. I am under the East team, and I'm now recently under the South and Solihull team, so I'm pretty much covering the whole of the Birmingham area, Birmingham and Solihull, and I go into the community generally with colleagues to see women and their families in the community and to support them and give them hope that recovery is possible, and well, more than possible. It's you know, it's said and done really, and that they can get on with their lives and become the parents they want to be. At the moment, obviously, I'm not out in the community, I'm working from home, so it's a lot of telephone contact, and I'm still running the virtual cafe group once a month as well, so for women who've had postpartum psychosis.
That sounds interesting. We'll come back to that later on. Virtual coffee, indeed, that sounds lovely. And then I'll move over to our other organisation. We've got two guests from there, Rob and Donna. So I don't know who'd like to go first from there to introduce yourselves.
I'm Rob Ewart, so I am the Operations Director for Acacia Family Support. So Acacia Family Support, we're a Christian charity based in Birmingham. We cover the whole of Birmingham at the moment. We're looking to expand out further into the West Midlands, but as yet we are just Birmingham based. And so primarily we work with moms and dads and families who are experiencing pre and postnatal depression and anxiety in that sort of mild to moderate end of that spectrum. We work alongside other specialist services so that we have got good pathways into those more intensive services if they're needed. Yeah, so we have actually got centres across Birmingham where we would normally deliver face-to-face befriending, group work, or other bits and pieces. At the moment, obviously, because we're all very restricted in our social contact, we're focusing on telephone support. We've got some online peer support groups, and we're just launching some online CBT based group work as well. So all our services can be accessed online now at the moment.
Wonderful, that's really good. And you have your colleague Donna with you today as well. Hi Donna.
Hi there, my name's Donna Francis. I'm one of the locality managers at Acacia. So the areas that I oversee is the Young Parents Project and the BAME project. So because of COVID-19, all of our services are now gone to telephone based. We have looked at other systems of, video calling, but that hasn't been something that has been taken up by our families. So we're very busy trying to look at the additional needs as well of the families that we work with. And as Rob said, we work around the mild to moderate end of postnatal depression and anxieties. I suppose with COVID-19, we have seen increased anxieties from a lot of our families, well, the mums that we were working with in particular, just because of the changes that life is bringing. And I suppose, yeah, just looking at one of the other things that's happened is where for some of our mums who have experienced anxiety, just the fact that they're more in a comfort zone, being able to have that given that it's okay to be at home. So, it's that predicting there will be increased anxieties when we come out of this lockdown process, really.
Yeah, indeed, we're all expecting that there will be, and it's difficult for mums at the moment. I think a lot of them are just so busy coping and managing at home that they're not, and looking after others, not really thinking about themselves, and not seeing what's going on with themselves. And when we come out, there probably will be a big rise in anxieties and different issues.
It's interesting that So early on, when we went into what what we were calling lockdown, the number of referrals into Acacia dropped very sharply and remained really low. And I think part of that, as you say, is people just being distracted with all the COVID-19 related things that are going on, and that having a huge impact. But we've noticed just over the last week or two, and I don't know if it's any coincidence that does coincide with talk about releasing the lockdown and children maybe having to go back to school, more people going back to work, etc. We've seen quite a steep resurgence of referrals now. They've really started to go up again. So it's going to be interesting, isn't it, to see how that pans out over the coming months.
Definitely, indeed. And with Ramadan as well, I think a lot of people were very distracted with Ramadan and the rituals of Ramadan and the prayers and the spirituality of that and how high they were, and that once we come out of that now as well, and changing again routines and not having been in that environment and not taking on the way we interact with each other, which we should be taking on, and continuing it outside. But life gets in the way, in person. People come back to their own what they were like beforehand. Then we'll probably see a bit more of the issues there as well coming up, and you'll probably be on data with more referrals indeed after, especially after this show, hopefully. And
I think being at home in that sort of situation just generally has been giving a full sense of security, hasn't it, to mums, and like we said, there's been like an absolute distraction, isn't there, with COVID-19, and maybe mums particularly who are getting very anxious, that could and would be likely to be put down to the whole COVID-19 thing, and getting anxious about that and how that's affecting them, and that's the issue, and trying to reassure them that everything's okay, but not recognizing that actually that anxiety is probably a symptom of a deeper anxiety, which could be postnatal anxiety or prenatal anxiety, but it not being recognized because it's all mixed in with what's happening with the COVID-19.
I think you're so right with that, Rob.
Lovely what you're just saying, Rob. I really, you've just led us lovely into mental health and talking about perinatal mental health, really, because some of our listeners may not be used to this terminology and may not understand what is perinatal mental health, what is anxiety and how it affects mental health, what are the other types of perinatal mental health. So I think we need to explain that, and thank you for introducing us lovely into that. So I wonder how can we explain that more? Do anybody would like to?
Yeah, I suppose with the symptoms of postnatal depression and anxiety, you're looking at that feeling of sadness, but an ongoing feeling of sadness. So we hear a lot about the baby blues soon after giving birth, but it's more than the baby blues. This lasts for more than a few days. So it's looking at that thing of having a lack of energy, not being able to sleep, or when you're woken up, not being able to get back to sleep. Just feeling irritated and irritable at times as well. And there may be times where for some mums who aren't able to bond with their baby. So these are the things that we're looking for, or what we talk about. And I suppose in extreme cases, you are looking at the potential of self-harm. So yeah, or taking of life as well, to put it bluntly. So it can be quite debilitating for a new mom or a pregnant mom. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's something for family members to definitely look out for. And then just looking at those anxieties, so things that you may have been quite comfortable doing, going out and going places and socializing, not being able to do those things anymore, and there's that constant fear, and the manifesting of physical symptoms within that.
Yeah, I think other key sort of things could be a feeling of hopelessness and being unable to cope are quite regular feelings as well, and that you're failing, that you're a failure. They're all very common feelings with people experiencing PND.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a range there of feelings, a range of way people feel that you might be picking up, and it's very different, as you're saying, from the blues, and it's continuing on. Is there other kind of symptoms or other mental health conditions? What would other symptoms be, Hannah, there for parents that come to you?
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of awareness, relatively speaking, in recent years, although I still think lots more in different communities around, you know, having words to describe it, having understanding those cultural expectations around mental health anyway. But I suppose at APP we work, when you talk about a spectrum of illness, Rob and Donna have talked about that kind of mild to moderate end of types of anxiety, depression. Postpartum psychosis is the very, very severe end. And when you think of that spectrum of illnesses, it's rare in some ways, but, you know, 1 to 2 in every 1,000 women who give birth will experience a postpartum psychosis. That's about 1,400 people a year across the country. So not really small numbers. It's certainly an illness I'd never heard of before I had it myself, and nobody I knew of was aware of it. There are some links to bipolar type illness, so if anybody has that kind of diagnosis or has had similar experiences in the past and is expecting a baby, what's really important is to be knowing that there is a risk of becoming unwell, because postpartum psychosis does usually, classically, develop very quickly. It can be hours, days or weeks of having a baby, and those very, very severe symptoms of paranoia. You mentioned sleep before, but actually not physically being able to sleep with postpartum psychosis is quite common. You know, people will go for days.
Yeah, I went 5 days without sleep before I was taken to the hospital. So
yeah, and I think there's something there about people thinking you don't sleep when you have a new baby and babies are awake, but actually if you have no need for sleep, if you have that feeling of mania, if you actually feel you're doing wonderfully at being a new parent and you don't need to sleep, then it's something to be aware of, that isn't really what you'd be expecting. Hallucinations, you know, seeing things that aren't there, hearing things that aren't there, racing thoughts, being very, very, very busy in your mind, in your body, is a classic kind of symptom. I suppose knowing what's normal, again, Rob and Donna, you talked with the women that you're supporting, what do they normally cope with? Of course, when you've got a new baby, everything's on its head, but actually some things really aren't. They're outside that scope of normal. And women often are unwell and not really knowing that they're unwell. And it's those around them, so those family members that really do know them, their wide, you know, their communities, who are really, really important to be able to pick up those signs. Psychiatric emergency really is what we call postpartum psychosis, because it can be very, very dangerous to women who, using my own experience, I couldn't look after myself, let alone being able to look after a baby. I didn't want any harm to come to anybody, but I was blissfully unaware of the world around me, shall we say. People talk about feeling like they're on a different planet. So sometimes those anxiety feelings, and I suppose especially around COVID now, can be early symptoms. I know I was probably presenting as really, really very anxious at first, but it went past any kind of anxiety into imagining things that could not possibly be true. You know, some of the hallucinations I was having were just really, really, really out there. And for me, like 50% of all women who have this illness had never been unwell before. So that was a very, very scary time. But the good news being that the treatments are out there, and once you get that support, you get yourself preferably to a specialist perinatal mental health team. You can be very well treated. As with all perinatal mental health problems, you know, there is help out there, even at COVID-19 and the difficult situation we're in. We want that message to be quite clear as well, that the NHS is open when it's needed for services, as are we as organisations working with women and families and communities at this time.
And I think that's the great thing, isn't it, that we're able to come onto this show and be able to raise awareness around postpartum psychosis and postnatal depression and anxiety, because there is that fear, especially from new mums who are going to be thinking, well, I'm not good enough if I share how I'm feeling, because our thoughts can get quite dark, especially when we're in our lowest mood. And there's that thought that, well, somebody's going to come and take my baby because they're going to think that, you know, I'm not good enough to be able to care for my baby. And if my family need to come in and do that, then I'm not a good enough mother. So there's a lot of racing thoughts, and we have all this overthinking. And, you know, hopefully, you know, we're able to share with at least somebody that there is help out there. You know, the agencies that's there, the NHS, you know, go and see your doctor. It's all about working with you to keep families together.
Yeah, that's so important. I thank you, Donna, for bringing up that, because I know with a lot of the families we work with, that's what comes up continuously of why they don't approach services for support. They fear their children are going to be taken away. So it may be that baby or the children that they have, the older children, they fear that they're going to lose their whole families. So they suffer in silence, and you know, until it becomes then so bad that they have to go into hospital or whatever, instead of coming early for the support and the treatment. So how could, if we have a partners listening into this, or sisters listening into this, or mums-in-laws listening into this, how can they pick up on things? What should they be looking out for in the beginning, in the early stages, either the presentation of the person or what they're saying or what they're doing, to think, okay, maybe something's not quite right here?
I think it's more how the mum might be presenting. So you might find that they're a little bit more tearful than what they've ever been. There may be that difficulty in bonding, just finding the usual things that they would be doing to be just that little bit overwhelming, and then becoming tearful. So everyday life just looks that little bit different, not wanting to visit with family, taking things very sensitively. So I think it's that, you know, you might lose your sense of humour, you might be worrying a lot more, picking up on things that you wouldn't normally pick up on. So yeah, I think a lot, it's about, there is no rhyme or reasoning to it, but if you're with your partner or a family member and you see that there's certain changes and they're in that perinatal period, it's worth approaching them and having that conversation with them to see how they are feeling and trying to normalize that a little.
Yeah, I think a woman acting totally out of character or totally extenuated in what she's doing, and very with postpartum psychosis, a lot of the time it's not so much of the sadness, it can be elation. I know I had postpartum psychosis after both of my children, and especially after my son. I remember I was just euphoric and just like, I've got the family I want, and I'm, you know, this is amazing, and I can do everything, and I don't need to sleep again, and all of that came back. And yeah, there's some really dark times with postpartum psychosis, and a lot of stuff that I did and experienced when I was unwell is very traumatic, far too traumatic to explain over the radio. But some of it is just, you know, it was so clear I'd lost my mind, because I seriously thought I could click my heels together and get back home from the hospital. I could jump through chalk paintings and everything was going to be okay. And I literally was jumping on the floor. And for me, things were opening, you know, rooms were changing colour around me so that it was more, you know, like terracottas rather than horrible blues and stuff. And just, but there was still that overwhelming sense of being really actually petrified and scared. And I think people talk about anxiety, but I didn't know what that was until I had my daughter. And I'd never experienced a mental health condition before I'd had children. And just that fear inside me of something bad is going to happen and I'm going to drop the baby accidentally. Nothing was, you know, in my mind, I never wanted to harm myself or my children or anyone, but it was just that fear that something could happen if I didn't keep on hyper alert. And I think that's why I had to stay awake, because if I'd have relaxed and gone to sleep, then an accident could quite easily have happened and I might not be here to tell the story today. So
I think that's an interesting point, because you said there about feeling that you may drop the baby. A lot of people might have the perception that, you know what, if you've got postnatal depression or psychosis, you want to harm your baby, that perinatal mental health is about harming the baby, when it really isn't. No. You know, it can be that other end of extreme protection.
This is a lovely conversation we're having, and we do need to go to a commercial break, I'm afraid, so I'm going to have to pause it at the moment, and we'll come back and continue it after the commercial break. Listeners, do grab a pen and paper, because the organisations are going to tell us their details, how you can contact them after the break also. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back after that commercial break. You're tuned in to Parenting Hour on Unity FM 93.5. My name is Kathleen. We're halfway through a very exciting and interesting show. We've been talking a lot about perinatal mental health, which we've explained is from pregnancy up to 2 years. And we're explaining some of the signs and symptoms before the commercial break. And there's a range of signs and symptoms, but I don't know whether we fully went into everything, because the break comes very quickly on this show indeed. And I'm going to pass back to Rob to explain a little bit more about that again. Especially the differences between the blues and when it might move over or shift, because, you know, there's a lot of mums go through, most mums, 80%, when I was a midwife, we actually had it on our checklist of things to look out for. Parents used to stay longer in hospital in those days, and we had checklist, were they going through the blues or not? So we were actually keeping records of it. But now, because parents are in and out in the same day, and there's not as much conversations about baby blues, people might not know, what is this? What is baby blues? So Rob is going to explain a little bit about that to us indeed, and some of the symptoms that we should be looking out for.
Well, yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we've talked about a lot of the symptoms, haven't we? Especially that sort of PND and anxiety symptoms around sort of sleeplessness and irritability and low mood, and so many of those things, which they can actually be normal and can be part of that sort of baby blues thing, which on the whole, it's normal for that to last a week or two. The sleep deprivation, exhaustion. Yeah,
and I think Rob has just frozen on us there for a minute. Are you back again, Rob? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, did I freeze?
Yeah. Unfortunately, this is technology. You know, what can we do about it? Our listeners know that we are doing this especially for them.
So yeah, so a lot of those things can actually be fairly normal for that baby blues period of you know, a week or two. I think the concern is when that becomes more prolonged and those things are not going away. I think that's where you need to start really having some concern. Or if those symptoms, as already been said, are quite severe or very severe, then obviously something needs to be done sooner rather than later. There are other perinatal mental health problems that we haven't really had time to mention, like post-traumatic stress disorder. That's another thing, but again, you would see unusual behaviours going on, and if that's going on, like Donna said, if other members of the family are seeing that in a mum or even a dad, changes in mood and other things of concern like that, it's really important to try and get some help early on, and the earlier the better. The ideal person for that is the GP. If you're still involved with either a midwife or a health visitor, to speak to those guys about your concerns as well. You know, and we need to remember that this happens before birth as well, so you can develop any of these things in that run up to having the baby, as well as after.
You can indeed, and you mentioned dads there, and I think we need to talk a little bit more about dads, because people think in general that what we're talking about here only affects mums, but dads don't suffer paternal mental health issues. So maybe, Rob, you can tell us a little bit about dads and what dads could be suffering.
Yeah, well, although postpartum psychosis is not something dads experience, all the other maternal mental health problems they can do. So personality depression and anxiety is very common. OCD is not unknown, and post-traumatic stress disorder is also known in dads. And in fact, some research was done a few years ago looking at smaller pieces of research from around the world, putting those all together and having a good look at that, and concluding that it looks like somewhere in the region of 50% of dads whose wives have got a perinatal mental health problem also develop their own. So obviously those are huge numbers. Those really are huge numbers. So we're saying, aren't we, that somewhere in the region of 13 to 20%, so almost a fifth of mums will experience some form of perinatal mental health problem. Well, half as many as that, so a tenth, 1 in 10 dads, they'll also experience their own. And the more research has been done, the more that it's been recognised that that's not just a matter of emotional aspects of the mental health, the same sort of things with exhaustion and huge changes and anxiety and stuff like that. But there are actually chemical changes that are going on in men, just as they go on with women when they're coming up to a pregnancy and they get a new baby. So there's a reduction in testosterone, there's an increase in estrogen, there's other hormonal changes in men, so making men also susceptible to mental health problems, which also need to be recognised and need to be treated. But obviously for men, there's even more reluctance, there's even more social stigma around that, to be not coping, not being the rescuer. I experienced postnatal depression myself from the birth of my second son. So obviously I didn't recognise it at the time. In fact, I've only recognised it since I've come to work at Acacia, which is, was 10 years more than 10 years down the line before I came to work at Acacia. And then only since I've been there, I've thought about it and thought, that was postnatal depression, wasn't it? I experienced anxiety and depression, which started just before the birth and then went on after he was born. And then I had that on and off for 3 years. I was on medication. Like I say, it's only working for Acacia that I've finally come to put the pieces together and think, oh yeah, I actually had it myself. Oh. But yeah, but I know for me, it was a huge issue actually talking to anybody, admitting to anybody. I actually thought I was going completely mad and that I'd gone mad and that was it then, now. And it's not something I wanted to share with anybody. I just wasn't coping, but I just put that facade on, as you do, I just tried to present a face to the world that wasn't real. But that used to frequently crumble, and so I'd have to leave, especially social situations, make excuses constantly to leave because I just wasn't able to cope with them mentally. Yeah, it's a huge issue, and I think, we know that for men it's a lot more difficult to engage them.
And it's important to say that we do actually support dads at Acacia. So we come together with the whole family. So we have, support for the mom and support for the dad.
I think, yeah,
important there indeed. When you're looking at, we don't think about dads, and this show is going out to families. A lot of dads will be listening to it on their way home from work, etc. But maybe the first time that they have ever come across the statistics, come across the evidence that changes happen to themselves. So we really need to be talking about this more. Hannah, you were going to say something?
Yeah, and as Rob said, men don't get postpartum psychosis. I mean, they might have psychotic episodes as part of a different mental health condition that, might affect them when their partner's had a baby. But what we do find with the women and the families we support is that the dads are sometimes literally holding the baby because their wife is so unwell, and they absolutely need support as well, which we can really, really give, because peer support is very valuable. We have some dad partner peer supporters. We've actually just started a Facebook group to be able to support those dads. And I know, I'm sure Natalie will echo, yes, it's a very traumatic experience to go through, but it's perhaps even more so for that dad who has never seen their wife or partner in that way. So yeah, the whole family needs support.
Mm-hmm. And Robbie,
Yeah. I was just going to say that something that's interesting with dads who develop perinatal mental health problems is one of the symptoms that's more unique to dads is that one of the ways that they tend to cope is by developing more sort of risky and extreme behaviours. So they might start drinking more, or they might suddenly start using drugs when they haven't used drugs before, or you know, they might be racing around, criminal behaviour, all sorts of things, just very risky behaviour. That's a very common thing that increases in men when they're experiencing these problems.
So it's good. So the show we're putting out this evening is not just for women and for women to understand their own issues, or for dads to understand issues of women, but actually for women to understand issues of dads, and dads to understand themselves as well. It's really important that we have these discussions out there, and people to understand each other. And I didn't realize it was so high actually for the dads. 50% of that's a really high statistic rate. You know, when you look at it, you think about 5% of dads, but wow, you're talking about much more than we before recognized. If we were to look at the issues of a mum, for example, go back to that for a bit now, and think about what mums are going through. How could dads pick up and help mums? What would they be looking out for to pick up for mums to support them, to send them on to your organizations, or to ring your organizations and seek help?
Well, I think for Acacia, we've got an online referral form, so the dad could sit down with the mom and go through that form and get a referral into Acacia. Generally, that's picked up within a couple of days, really, depending on where we're at with things. But you can look at getting an assessment within a week or so, and then start getting support. So as quick as the quicker that's done, the quicker you can start addressing some of the low mood and anxiety issues, really.
And I think dads, for women, if you're worried about possible symptoms of postpartum psychosis, and we've been doing a lot on our social media around those signs and symptoms, being worried about a new mum that you're close to, and that dad or that male in their life might be ideally placed to say she's not herself, then as you say, Donnie, you can help with all of that kind of practical stuff. You can take somebody to their GP. I know my husband spoke for me when I was physically unable to get the words out. He was able to articulate, look, this isn't normal, and really push to get some support, because it's really important that we were able to get that information, that care and that treatment. I suppose I mentioned it before, peer support as well. Our online forum, our dads group, our one-to-one emails, our regional peer support is predominantly focused on mums, but we're really keen that actually dads get peer support as well. We have an amazing dad who talks about when he'd sadly taken his wife and baby to a mother and baby unit. He'd gone home to an empty house, and so thankful that he'd been given some information about APP and our online peer support, and that was something that was a real lifeline to him for the weeks and months ahead. He received support as well as his wife getting this excellent treatment, and getting that family back together.
Yeah, and even out in the community, working with the women and their families. I've had a sister who was just so grateful for me to be able to just come into that house and explain to them what had happened to me and my recovery journey, and the woman who was unwell was just she was just saying, do you think I'll be able to be a nurse? Will I be able to retrain? And I'm like, you can just be anything you want to be. This isn't the end. This is just the beginning. It's just a this is a phase that you're going through, but you will come out the other side, and you know, you'll probably be more empathetic than you've ever been before because you've been so unwell. You can understand other people's blights and troubles and stuff much more. But the sister just had that glimmer of hope in her eye that she was going to get her sister back and not have her trapped in her own world forever. So
I think that is critically important for anybody listening, to understand if you're experiencing this or you're seeing it in a partner or family member and you're really concerned, is the sooner you get help, the better. And this is a temporary phase that you'll go through and you'll get out to the other end of it. So there's hope there. It is a temporary phase. And so important that you try and get help as soon as possible.
That's really important, and I love that you're getting across that message. Is how can some communities, especially if we're looking at the BME communities, the Muslim communities, there's often confusion there between obsession, jinn, and people feel that it is they're obsessed in some way, that it's not themselves, and they don't actually go to the GP. They go to maybe a religious leader, or don't go to anybody. What advice can you give them, those people?
I think that's it's really difficult, isn't it? It's when that's really part of you, part of your culture and the belief of everybody around you. But I think it's just really important to look for information. There's plenty of information out there, to look into that yourself and to look into it for other people. On our Acacia website, we've got a specific BAME section for mums and for professionals. It's got a lot of multilingual resources there. So some of that's reading materials. There's videos on there that give education. There's a lot of South Asian resources on there that are in South Asian languages, and I would really encourage family members and the mums and dads themselves to have a look at that stuff. Yeah. Great.
And what's the website?
So that's our Acacia website. So it's www.acacia.org.uk. You can access the BAME pages and the BAME section right from the front page. If you're on the phone, if you scroll, just keep scrolling down, and eventually you'll see the BAME buttons. You can actually go in the quick links at the top of the page if you know what they are and where they are, and go straight to the BAME pages. As Donna said, you can refer yourself. You can also ask a question there. So if you go to the contacts page, if you want to ask about somebody else or even about yourself, you just want to ask those initial questions, do that and somebody will get in touch.
Great. Yeah.
Kathleen, I would say you asked the question about if somebody was to go to a religious leader. I'd say for anybody that's listening, if somebody was to come to them and they felt that they weren't the right person to be addressing that, is to direct that person to their GP, or encourage them to speak to their health visitor, or maybe support them to do that. Because when we're experiencing, whether it's postnatal depression or anxieties or any form of psychosis, we're not able to do things under our own steam, and we do need that additional support. So it's taking that time to be able to do those things with that person, and maybe encouraging them to confide in a family member, because sometimes there can be stigma within family, within communities. So it's really about trying to break down that stigma and just to normalize these situations, which is why it's great that we can come here and talk about this today. So yeah, just being able to go out there and encourage people to go and speak to their GP, that would be great.
Great, and thank you for that. And I think actually a lot of the religious leaders are getting education, and probably you provided some of it already to them about where to go, what to do, and signs and symptoms. And even now we've got some imams like Brother Saeed is often on the show. He's a counsellor and an imam, so he's in the best position for both actually, and able to signpost people to the right places. But it is getting that information for everybody out there, so people can get the immediate help and support that they need.
One of the things that we do at Acacia is raise awareness around postnatal depression and anxiety within BAME BAME communities. So that's a small piece of work that we do, and that's going out to agencies or speaking to mums groups, that type of thing, around postnatal depression, just to try and normalise that, give it more understanding.
Do you find, thank you Donna for that, that's really good to tell us, and Rob, about Acacia, that do you find it's the same in APP? Hannah and Natalie, do you have many people from ethnic minority communities coming forward, or
Yes, yeah, we absolutely do. And I think, you know, to say those two words again, peer support, we have a number of fantastic volunteers who support both our regional projects, including in the Birmingham area, and our online, who are from those different backgrounds. So we have people who are from the BAME population and have experienced postpartum psychosis themselves. So I think you're absolutely right, Donna. It's about awareness, which is such a massive part of what APP does, raising awareness that this illness exists in the first place, that it's treatable, that the stigma, it's such a horrible word, isn't it, psychosis? It's such a scary word. And sometimes, you know, the feedback that we have had in the past, I think it's changing, but still is prevalent in some places. It's a very scary thing to talk about. And my response to that is yes, it is, but it's much more terrifying for that woman and her family to have never heard about it. So we don't want to scare women, of course we don't, but it's really important that, you know, and all of the information on our website as well, and our peer support, which is easily accessible from there, is
and
something
what is your
that...
website? Can you just mention your website, so in case people...
Yeah, our website is www.app-network.org, and we're on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as well.
Excellent. So there's a lot of information. We touched a bit about treatments and coming out the other side, but we haven't given a kind of a picture of what it's like. We've been kind of talking a lot about the signs, symptoms, and that for people to come forward. But can we spend the last few minutes of the show a little bit of time on what is it like when you come out of this? What people's lives? What are they like? What do they return to normal? What do they do following up and recovery stage? Yes, Natalie.
I think going through any mental health condition can really change your life, but not always for the worst, sometimes for the better. I think it makes you definitely appreciate what you've got when you've come through something so dark as psychosis at times, and I think it just it gives you hope that, you know, things can move forward, and you're not forever going to be out of your mind and stuck in a psych ward. You know, you can enjoy time, and you can have teenagers who are, you know, bickering and just playing Roblox at the moment and stuff, and, you know, just you can be the parent you want to be, and I think that's what's important. And definitely you will get your confidence back, because that was the thing that took me the longest, especially being unwell twice, and then later on with bipolar. It does really knock your confidence, so clawing that back, it's a victory once you get there.
Great. I can see you all nodding and smiling there. So there's big opportunities and life goes on. Life even better goes on afterwards. So is there any kind of other stories that you have? I know we have Natalie's story here, she's been through it, but other people that comes to your mind, just that you have been through something serious and but have come out the other side and done other things?
I think it's all of our peer supporters at APP. I'm sure a lot of the people who are involved in Acacia, and, you know, Rob, thank you for sharing your own experience there about, you know, being a dad and only recently recognising what you've also been through. I think that there are so many people out there, and I always just have this line which sounds a bit corny, and you can have amazing friends and family and mental health professionals, but nobody really gets it like someone else who's been there. And I think that's what three of our organisations are doing, giving that hope, giving that support, just that hold for somebody that they can get there, they can do it.
And as you say, so we've got most of our volunteers have been through and experienced similar things themselves, so they've obviously gone on to be able to use their experience to help others, and several of those volunteers have actually gone on to work in the profession, either as counsellors, other supported in mental health, and somebody who became a midwife, somebody who's become a health visitor, who never thought that there would be life beyond their PND, that they thought that was going to limit them, and that was that. But yeah, there's hope out there.
So it's wonderful to see that, indeed, and I'd like to congratulate you both as organisations, indeed, on the work you're doing, the amount of time that you put into this, the commitment you put into this, the passion you put into this, and how you're there for people, for parents, for mums and dads. And I hope we got across that message today, that this is an issue that can help anybody at any time. And the signs, symptoms we spoke about, but there's more about it on both of your websites. They know where to go. They can go to Acacia website or Postpartum Psychosis website, or actually a phone in or email in Unity FM, and we will pass on any information or signpost them also towards you. It's lovely having you both here today, or both organisations here today. I really want to thank you. Thank you for coming on board. Thank you for giving your time for this. Thank you for talking about mental health illnesses there, so that people know where to come to. Is there anything you'd like to say to our listeners as we're saying goodbye to them?
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure they're very grateful indeed. Have a great week. Have a great week, listeners. It was wonderful having you tuned into the show. I hope it's beneficial for you and for others. Indeed, it may not be for yourself, but it can be for others. So please do keep talking about this topic. And the more we talk about it, the more people will come forward and know where there is that professional help and support to go to. So please do pass on these messages. These are crucial messages from dads and from mums, indeed, to your networks. Jazakallah khair for listening in. Have a great week, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. And until next week, take care of yourself. Keep safe. Keep really safe in this COVID period. But all services are working, as mentioned before. So if you are worried, please do ring your GP, your midwife, your health visitor, or contact them, or go to the NHS. We're all working. We're all there for you